Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to call this special meeting of the Norwalk Board of Education to order. It's Thursday, February 24th, 5:02. We have 8 of 9 board members present by my count, and we have one fairly major thing on the agenda tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the our Pledge of Allegiance. I assume we don't have the video tonight, Ralph. Oh, we do. Okay.
We do.
Okay, great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Terrific. Thanks, Ralph, and thanks to wonderful Norwalk Public Schools students for leading us in the pledge tonight. So I think we go directly into our primary agenda item for tonight. Tonight, we as a board will review and take possible action on continuing COVID safety protocols in our Norwalk Public Schools. I think we have members of the Norwalk Health team here to give us just the latest update of where we stand. If we want to start with that, Dr. Estrella.
That'll be great. Thank you. So we have Deanne Diamore as well as Brian Meeks here to provide us with the latest update in terms of our COVID data trends. We also have Dr. Weinberger with us as well, who has been also instrumental in helping us identify the different data points to make informed decisions around our COVID trends. I'll turn it over to you, Deanne.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to introduce Brian Weeks. He is our epidemiologist. He's going to be showing you the latest data that actually just got released earlier this afternoon. So thank you, Brian.
All right. Good afternoon / good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me back again. So I'm going to jump right over to the PowerPoint. And hopefully you should see it on your screen now. So as I always like to say when sharing any sort of COVID situational awareness, this data is up to date as of the afternoon of today, February 24th, 2022, is provisional and subject to change. So starting off, as you may recall from the previous presentation, this is, on the right-hand side is the CDC COVID-19 county levels of transmission for the last 7 days. As you can see, the majority of the country in terms of counties still is in the high category per the CDC's framework. That's 81.78% of the country, but also substantial category, which is one below high, is 13.63%. And as you can see on the right-hand side, zoomed in for Connecticut, Fairfield and Windham counties have entered the substantial transmission category. Per the CDC's current framework, in terms of mass mandates, they are still recommending for those that are experiencing moderate or low activity. That's where obviously vaccination, regardless of somebody's vaccination status, that they should be mindful of that. So anyways, moving forward, in terms of global stats, as you can see for the country, for the world, 430 million global confirmed cases, 5.9 million global deaths, 78 million plus US confirmed cases, 943,000 plus US deaths. So in terms of SARS-CoV-2 variant surveillance from the CDC, as you can see here, kind of similar chart from last time in terms of Delta being the orange, Omicron in the purple, and the light purple here being BA2, which we're still keeping a very close eye on. That is at a estimated total of about 3.8% relative to the time period of February 13th to February 19th. As you can see, looking at it from a regional perspective, the eastern and western seaboard still has a majority of BA2 in terms of prevalence and incidence. The new update from the State Health Department up to February 12th, as you can see, the red here is Omicron, and it is still running the show here in terms of COVID presentation. In terms of hospitalizations, this is data looking at from the entirety of the pandemic up to today. So the most recent report from the State Health Department, as you can see, the most recent number is 248. Fairfield County being 23% of that, Hartford County being 33, and New Haven County being 27% of those hospitalizations in terms of the recent data. In terms of COVID case rates for town or city in the state of Connecticut, the most recent data, again, as you can see, the palette has changed a bit with more orange entering the picture as cases continue to downtrend for certain cities and states, cities and towns. And so as you can see from the time period of February 6th to the 19th, Norwalk is at 11 cases per 100,000 with the new report. So as you can see, Norwalk here in the orange, but then also surrounding towns and cities experiencing different case rates. So looking at the big 7 Connecticut cities, Norwalk is at 11, Danbury is the lowest at 8.3 per 100,000, and then Waterbury 15.5. And then New Haven, the highest in this comparison for 22.2 per 100,000. And so again, this is data reflective February 6th to the 19th. In terms of the total pandemic impact for city of Norwalk, we're at 21,246 total cases, 261 total deaths. And then in terms of the most recent 2 calendar weeks, again, for February 6th to the 19th, their largest proportion of cases is at 17.2%, 30-39, which has been kind of the usual situation with that bell curve, but also kind of following with with the prior presentation, less than 10 years of age at 16.4% with the second highest level proportion, and then followed by 40-49 at 14.2%. In terms of vaccination, so the state has updated the additional dose received stats, so it includes 5 to 11 years old. This is accounting for those that are immunocompromised, immunosuppressed that weren't getting that additional booster dose. But nonetheless, as you can see, for all ages relative to additional doses received, that's at 36.67%. For fully vaccinated, 77.73%, and then initiated vaccination, which means getting at least 1 dose of the vaccine, at 88.08% for the all age groups. And but again, kind of honing in on students and their age groups, at 5 to 11-year-old age group, which is at, in terms of fully vaccinated status, 35.15%, and then 12 to 17 at 85.49%. So just as a reminder, again, we still have our COVID testing site open 7 days a week at Shady Beach. So tomorrow it will be closed because of the weather. But nonetheless, it's really important, and great opportunity for individuals that suspect that they meet certain risk factors, having been exposed to COVID or they're presenting symptoms consistent with COVID, to get testing, as well as obviously more information about COVID vaccination at the norwalkt.org/vaccine website. More information will be shared with tomorrow, Friday, somewhere in the afternoon, in regards to the mayor's weekly report. So that's going to be on the city webpage and social media. So definitely check it out if you want some more detail, more information. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Weeks, I don't know if there's anything we need to add to that in terms of newest data, Dr. Estrella, or I do want to use the time to allow board members to also kind of ask questions and share their perspectives, and hopefully take a vote.
I know that Ms. Fayois has some information that she would like to add so that the board has some additional context from some earlier conversations today. So
Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Estrella, and hello, board. Good evening. And we just wanted to provide you with the latest NPS data. So as of the 20th, there were 13 positive cases that were identified amongst our student population. And on the 23rd, we tested 351 students, and we had 0 positive cases from that testing. And then I'll leave it up to the board to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fayois. And so, yeah, I think at this point, I will throw it open to the board unless there's anything else, any other data that we want to have, Dr. Estrella?
At this point, those are the data points we wanted to share. We'll open it up now for board questions for the team that is here, that in terms of the presentation or any further questions they have in order to make a decision this evening.
Great. Sherry, I see your hand.
So I want to ask Dr. Weinberger, given the information that we have before us, would you recommend us dropping the mask mandate, particularly as it relates to our youngest kids, given that they're only at a 35% vaccination rate, and with everything else that we know, do you believe that it's safe for us to do this?
You're muted, Dr. Weinberg.
Very good question, and that's one that I fight with all the time. I'm very concerned that this younger population is at risk. We are seeing more hospitalization of these children. We're also seeing more long-term effects of COVID in these young children. Multiple system syndrome is occurring mostly in the unvaccinated. So this is of danger, and if we can find a way to protect them, I would. So if I had all the power in the world, I'd say I'd keep the mask mandate.
And Dr. Bert Weinberger, in terms of what you're seeing,
that would be until we see this thing really fall off. But this is sort of the same thing that we saw prior to Delta. Everything sort of came down and everybody started getting excited. But then Delta came, and that was very swift. We now have this new variant that's very low, it is present, and we actually don't know what's going to happen.
in terms of what you're seeing, are you referencing what you're seeing in Norwalk?
Yes, well, if I had my way, I'd do it all over, but I don't have my way.
Just to make sure you heard the question, you know, in terms of what you...
I would do that for Norwalk. I would hold off for as long as I could until we see these numbers really fall off and not start to rise again.
The data points you referenced were what you were seeing in Norwalk.
I'm sorry?
The data points you were referencing in terms of what you were seeing, you were putting it in, was that in Norwalk?
Norwalk, for Norwalk.
Yes.
Dr. Weinberger, Mary Ellen, I see your hand, and just FYI, I don't see everybody on my screen, so it might be easier to use the raise hand function on Zoom, but I do see you, Mary Ellen. Go for it.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm there. In the same vein, I'm not sure who to ask this question to, but I'm really concerned about that 5 to 11-year-old group, and how many or how often or where are the clinics opening in the elementary school to vaccinate those children?
Ms. Fayoles, can you
I
speak
could
to
try.
what we have in place?
Absolutely. So we've been doing weekly clinics, or every other week. The next clinic is going to be at CMS on March 1st. And we've been pretty successful in terms of scheduling the clinics so that we're providing access, which is one of the mitigating strategies that we would continue regardless of what the board decides today. We have clinics that have been scheduled for the 5 to 11-year-olds and for the 12 plus groups for the remainder of the spring until the end of the school year. So today, as we speak, there's 2 clinics happening.
2 clinics. And roughly how many children do we vaccinate when you go? Is there an average number, or is it just
No, it
dependent?
actually has varied quite greatly. So we had a clinic at Naramek a couple of weeks ago that only vaccinated 25 students or pupils. And then we had one at CMS about a month ago that vaccinated 125. So as you could see, it varies from location to location, and not necessarily predictable in terms of what our preconceived notions of which populations are getting vaccinated. So it really has to do with the time of the day of the week that it's available, if families are available, if the location is accessible to families. So that's why we try to spread it out as much as possible throughout the district so that we can try to have access to as many communities as possible. But the vaccination has been, the availability of vaccination has been pretty robust.
Okay, that's good. And I can see this is an area where we need to work to either still increase the availability, but also increase the participation in means that we can.
And if I may, that percentage for the 5 to 11-year-olds is also has to do with the fact that the availability for that vaccine came later than it did for the 12 plus age groups. So we are
Good point.
actually, yeah, we're actually on par with the other cities in the state. We were neck and neck with, I think, Stamford and Danbury last week. I have to look at the latest data that Brian showed today. But so we have been one of the leading cities in our vaccination rates for all age groups since vaccination has been available. So we do have a little bit of catching up to do just because of when those vaccinations were made available to that age group.
Thank you.
AOE's Kara.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Dr. Weinberger. I actually have two questions, and one is a follow-up to this conversation around the vaccination rates for our 5 to 11-year-olds. And I'm curious to know if you have a number in mind for what you would like to see that fully vaccinated rate at until a mask mandate were dropped. That's my first question.
I think this question really has to do with what we're talking about in terms of herd immunity and when we get it. And that data fluctuates someplace between 80 and 90%. So I would like to see a vast number of these children vaccinated, as we would for all vaccinations.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is around the safety of mask wearing itself. And we've heard from a lot of parents, especially of this younger age group, 5 to 11. And I'm curious to get your insights on whether or not there are any dangers or concerns with long-term mask wearing, meaning for a long duration of time during a typical school day. Is there any concern around the exchange of gases or not being able to breathe? Do you have anything to add to that?
There's no data to support that there's any physical issues. There are some data to support this communication and identity. There's some issues with that in masking.
But nothing that has to do with like the transfer of oxygen and CO2 and not being able to breathe properly and potentially causing other problems.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Erica.
My question is for Mr. Pennington. If we were to lift the mask mandate, can you speak to the mitigation strategies for our medically fragile students and families?
I can talk to if families are uncomfortable because of their situation. We have our homebound process that families could complete for that area. And then all of our other mitigating factors, I know Ms. Fayos, are still in place, and she can talk to a couple of those pieces. But in terms of if a family is very, concerned, we do have a homebound process that we have been working with families all throughout this year.
Thank you, Mr. Pennington. Mary Ellen, I see you. I'm going to bring Janine in and then come back to you. Janine.
Hi, Dr. Weinberger. I just had a follow-up or just continuing with Kara's question about the masks. I know she was speaking about oxygen and such. Parents were also concerned with the wearing the mask of the kids, children chewing on them, saliva, mucus, etc. Nothing as far as bacteria on the masks as well?
There hasn't been any data to support that. I totally agree with you that might be an issue, but I haven't seen anything that supports that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Mary Ellen, and then Sherry.
Yes, I'm on the same topic, but just a different angle. I'm wondering, in terms of the masks and the quality of the masks, they're farther enough away from the nose so breathing can occur more easily. How many, or do we, I'm not sure who to address this to, Deanna maybe, are we providing KN95 masks to any of the students? And since this is a long-term occurrence, the pandemic isn't evaporating when we make a decision tonight. Since we're in this for the long term, do we have plans to get more KN95s for children available as we move along?
Hi, Mary Ellen. I would actually defer that question to NPS in terms of, I haven't heard of any distributions coming from the state in terms of those masks and providing it. But if that is something that NPS has looked into or wanting to acquire for their students, I'm not aware of it, but I pass it on to NPS to answer that.
Okay, I'll try my best. This is when I miss Joanne Malinowski with me. But so we have not received any N95 masks from the state for students. N95 masks require a fitting. Our nurses wear them. And those masks actually tend to be safest, but pretty restrictive in terms of a person, a regular person like you and I, or even a student wearing it all day. What we have received for staff is these NIOSH N95s, which are a different rendition of a more secure mask, but they're not an N95 the way that our medical professionals wear them, but they do provide additional support. The guidance that we have seen around mask wearing for young people is that it should be a fitted mask and that the mask should be of a higher quality so that it actually can be more preventative of air flowing through, but that any mask, if it's better fitted, is better than no mask. That was the guidance that had been received when the Omicron was at its peak. So that was the guidance that we had received from the state, but we never received actual N95 masks for our students. I hope that answers it.
I appreciate that answer, but I would press that as we move forward in dealing with this pandemic, that we may explore more options that are fitted well for children that may have not come up yet from the government. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. I don't see any additional hands so far. Sherry. Yep, sorry.
What I was going to say in relationship to cloth masks, to piggyback on what Janine said, it would seem to me that given that some mask is better than no mask, if we were going to do a couple of masks, child wearing two, and there's a concern about saliva and all of this, it would seem that we could send our kids to school with more than one, right? We can purchase masks. They come in 5 and 10 packs. So I'm thinking if you're sending a child to school, perhaps after lunch, he or she could put on a new and clean mask or two as they go throughout the day, instead of having to wear the same mask all day. So that's an option. I'm just thinking, if my little one's going to school all day, he or she's coming home with a wet mask, I might, put a 5 or 6 pack in the backpack. After lunch, and it's really messy and wet, go in your backpack and get another mask. Put it on.
Ms. Brown, we actually have masks that are made available to students, and if they do get soiled, we do ask them to swap them out, and we have been all along, because we do have the surgical masks, and quite a lot of them that are better fitted for students, the little ones, and some that are more adult size. So we do have those on hand, and that is a great suggestion because it's what we've been doing.
Thank you. Erica.
This is a follow-up question for Dr. Weinberger. Just to clarify your response that there is no data to support that bacteria is being transferred on the masks. Can you just clarify if there's no data or if there has been no testing to that end?
You're on mute, Dr. Weinberger.
Sorry, there has been data that it does accumulate bacteria and virus, and it's caught in the filters, and that's one of the reasons that the higher quality masks are important.
So cloth masks are passing bacteria to the children?
Probably, but I have not seen any data specifically for that. I have not seen it.
So there has been studies. The
studies that have been done have been that the masks, the high quality masks, the N95s, KN95s, and the more fitted masks, particularly the KN95s and N95s have a layer that is electronically static, that it collects the viruses and doesn't let them come through. I don't know if they've done that for bacteria. I don't know that.
Thank you.
Dr. Weinberger. I am keeping an eye on the time. We have a forum starting at 6. I do have one follow-up question to you, Dr. Weinberger. Something you said earlier that sort of resonated with me. You said, if you had your way, you would probably have us continue to wear masks in public spaces, not just in public schools, and not just in Norwalk, but probably in a broader scale, which frankly would be my approach as well. But since we don't have that way, I wonder if you can offer an opinion on, given that the statewide mask mandate is ending on Monday, the indoor mask mandate in Norwalk is ending tonight. And in most public spaces, masks seem to be optional. My question is there a way to kind of measure the incremental benefit of having a mask mandate specifically in K-12 schools when it doesn't exist pretty much anywhere else? Is there an actual benefit? If it's so specifically targeted, is there an actual benefit?
That's actually a very good question, and I don't know, but it seems I don't know the answer to that. But it would seem to me that anything that we can do, any mitigation that you can do, is an improvement. This is not going away, and we're going to have surges again. And I think we have to put in place those parameters that say, okay, we have to go back to masks, we have to go back to distancing, or whatever it is. And I think that if I were a parent of a kid in school right now, particularly a very, very young kid, I'd be very concerned about this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Mary Ellen and Erica, I think your hands are still up, or are they back up? I don't.
I do have another question.
Okay.
Dr. Weinberger, can you speak to the latest on one-way mask wearing? So I'm wearing a mask, it's protecting me, and how much incremental benefit you get from somebody else wearing a mask in your presence?
You mean a mask with a valve? Is that what you're talking about?
No, so if a child is wearing a mask and it's their choice to wear a mask, how protected are they compared to if they're wearing a mask and their peers are also wearing a mask?
I think if the more people that are wearing masks, it helps to prevent the egress and ingress of virus, and I think that's what we're trying to prevent.
But has there been any latest studies on the incremental benefit of others wearing masks?
I cannot speak to that. I don't know if Deanna can or Brian.
I could jump in. This is Brian. So in terms of face masks, the best protections, obviously, when it comes, it's protecting the individual that is infected. So it's like source control. So I mentioned that before, and there still is filtration and protection from an individual, especially relative to what face masks they're wearing. If they're obviously COVID naive and not infected, but they may be exposed to air that is, have the virus particles in it. The other thing that's important, kind of going to the earlier question, was just making sure that when somebody's wearing a face mask, they're wearing it properly. If it is, covered in saliva or it's contaminated in some ways, it should be replaced. That's an important way to obviously offset that and make sure that you're getting full functionality of the face mask itself.
Thank you. And did Mary Ellen, do you have another question?
Yes, I have another question, but I'd first like to comment on what Brian just said. So interpreting you, Brian, you're saying that definitely there's a benefit to somebody who is wearing the mask for their own protection. I think that's been a sort of debate, and definitely it does protect that person. That's the first part of my question. Brian, do you want to respond to that?
So yeah, masks have been shown effective in both ways, but obviously it's most effective in terms of source control for an individual that's infected and expelling air that would be contaminated with virus particulate. That is where it's most effective. And obviously it's varied based upon what sort of face mask they're wearing and making sure that they're wearing it properly and correctly.
Right. So I'm thinking of a situation that may be coming up soon, that somebody with type 1 diabetes might want to protect themselves and continue to wear a mask. And that still would be protective for that person, even if others around them were not wearing masks. Am I right on that?
Correct. But it's a gradient in terms of the level of protection. Yes.
Okay. My other question is a little different area of this topic. And that is the question, what metric have we landed on that would say, if we do choose to drop the mask mandate for K through 12, that what metric would we be looking at to say, okay, the masks have to go back on? Would it be hospitalizations, which seem to be steadier than positivity rates? What would that be? And is that Deanna that would be answering that?
So I can start and then I can pass it on to Brian. So we've been having these discussions and we've been talking about making it as localized as possible. Within, like, let's say the board decided to go to mask optional, right? When would you want to go back to masks? If there's an indication of a cluster within a classroom, right, or within a grade, to be able to have the flexibility to then be able to respond to that and have those additional mitigation measures in place. So we would really look to recommend looking at, what's going on in the school building, what's going on in the school system to help guide that decision in terms of, when you would want to, as a board, decide to bring masks back. So that's where it starts. Obviously, there's the larger community level, looking if a new variant emerges, if hospitalizations go up, there's all of that. But we would recommend starting with looking at the data within the schools and what's going on locally. And Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, Deanna outlined it very well. We're obviously always factoring in while we do these COVID situational awareness updates, what's going on in the city as well as the state, country, and worldwide. But then also, most importantly, since we're talking about Norwalk Public Schools, the most important data would be dictating that would be coming out of the school system in terms of like the number of cases, where that's situated and things of that nature. But naturally, as Deanna was outlining, we want to get to the source control. So where those cases are presenting, and if it's obviously unique to a classroom, then the classroom would be addressed. If it's something unique to a grade, unique to a school, then that would be addressed. But ultimately, if we're in a situation where things are, ticking up for not only the city, but also for the school system, then naturally it would make sense to do something broader in an effort to mitigate it so we don't keep increasing the number and branches of COVID infection that, creates exponential growth, which is what we saw with the Omicron wave. So as evident with the new evolution of the virus, it's definitely much more infectious, even as we're seeing with BA2, which is, estimated to be about 1.5 times more infectious than even the regular Omicron we were dealing with in January. So when we factor these things in, we have to kind of also consider the infectivity and, offsetting accordingly.
I so appreciate this answer. This is a kind of new information for me in terms of your approach being looking at the cluster first, not going all out for Norwalk, but cluster first, if it can be contained, and then moving up. I would appreciate it if you sent that strategy line to us in a document. Thank you.
So yeah, I believe that would be something NPS would put together, and we will advise accordingly from the health department's perspective.
Thanks, Mr. Weeks. Godfrey.
When looking at processes or just exploring process to monetize ourselves for how we're doing, in terms of our current contact tracing procedures, protocol, or personnel, I understand it's not happening at the same intensity that it was being exercised before, correct? That's maybe a question for Sandra or maybe
That's
Dr.
correct.
Weinberg. And then looking at just being able to pinpoint, clusters or individuals in clusters that were gathering amongst individuals that were in open spaces or places that didn't have any mask mandates. Do we currently collect if you were in a place that didn't have any mask mandates? Do we collect data specific to location you contracted the virus, just to be able to decipher where masks played a role in it or not?
No, not necessarily. What we do collect is we collect like a positive case. If we identify a cluster, meaning if there are multiple positive cases that are coming into contact with one another at the schools, whether it's in the same class, the same group that's being pulled out, whether it's coming from the bus, we're able to track our own data internally to see how positive cases are interacting with one another. So we have been able to get that information. More recently, we haven't had those types of trends occurring, so we haven't been having to do that. And with Omicron, so many people were, contaminated and passing on COVID that those trends actually didn't mean anything because people were getting infected from so many different spaces. But we actually do collaborate between Missy and Brian to track the data and to see the trends that we're seeing within our schools. And we've been able to maintain pretty accurate data in terms of the positive cases that we have in our schools. And before this, how they may be in relationship with one another. We actually used to do investigations to see if we could better understand how students were contracting COVID and how we were potentially spreading it within the schools.
And up to this point, nothing specific to tracking masks, whether the kids were wearing it, we don't have any data for that.
Well, we've only just had masks, right? So we've had a mask mandate indoors. There was a brief period where it was optional for a little bit within the city, but then we ended up putting them back indoors. And the outdoor piece has been with no masking outdoors for quite some time, probably since last spring. So we've been in a situation where masks have been required for quite some time. So in school, we don't have spaces indoors where students were not wearing a mask other than when they were eating. But then when they were eating, we were asking them to distance. So every time we lowered one mitigating strategy, we would end up raising another, which was usually reducing density or creating more distance to try to actually protect the pupil. So we haven't been in a situation where that has been a potential source of data.
And look, acknowledging the city's plan to lift the mask mandate, what does that do for our capacity to mitigate anything? When looking at any protocols we keep in place in school or monitor, to see if our mitigation efforts would work if we kept masks in schools while the city lifted it.
If we kept them or if we made it optional, which?
Correct. Yes and yes. To the two
yes?
options. Yeah, two
Okay.
yeses.
So I'll take the because if we kept them, it would just be what we have, right? And then there's the home piece, I think, that people brought up, like if the whole community is not masking, what does that do for us? And we don't really know that. But if we did go with an optional mask, what we would do is still try to keep in place all the other mitigating strategies. So like we would maintain distance, we would make sure that we're sanitizing at the maximum level that we have been and having students sanitize. We would make sure that we're keeping data. So accurate data is another one that we would try to make sure. And then try to really promote the vaccination. So I think promoting vaccination and having families be more robust and actually promoting the screen testing. I think that's another one that we would try to say that if we are reducing this mitigating strategy, what are the other ones that we can actually increase to make sure that we are preparing for, sorry, my timer is on, preparing for masks coming off. So that's the best I think that we could do right now until we learned more. We know what to do to prevent spread. And I think we would just try to make sure that we're putting those things into place.
I think two
Thank you
factors
for
also
understanding that.
that are important to mention, Sandra, is also the filtering structures that we have, the HEPA filters in the classroom, as well as
Ventilation.
Ventilation, and increasing we have MER 13 filters in our ventilation system, which is an enhancement from that we didn't have previously. Those also help in terms of maintaining air quality in our buildings as well.
I will add just to this piece, and I don't want to belabor it, is that we did identify that there was much more transmissions happening in households than there were in schools. And that is something that is not unique to Norwalk. It's across most school districts and across the nation. So that is something that is a data point if you're going to be considering which setting really contributed to the spread of COVID. But again, that's a complicated response, right?
Thank you, Ms. Bayouis. I see Diana has a question, and then after that, I'm going to open it up to the board to see if we can arrive at a decision for how we would like to move forward.
Okay, so mine's two questions. One is, what is the plan? I know that there's a lot of discussion, and it's basically for the public, because I'm sure not everyone has read the information. The plan on buses. Children, if we decide to remove masks, children, will they be wearing them on the bus? And will the bus drivers be wearing a mask? That's one. And two, have we made arrangements for any children that have, any type of medical issues that the parents are worried about? If we lift the mask mandate, will they be able to learn from home? What are the arrangements we're making for those students?
I think with the mask mandate, we have to follow the federal guidelines until March 18. So depending on what the board decides, we would have to continue to mask children on the bus, as well as the drivers will have to wear masks because of the federal mandate. So they would also have to wear them. In terms of those students that might be considered medically fragile, as we do right now, is we would work with the families and provide homebound instruction for those students that families might decide that coming to school might not be the safest option for them if masks are lifted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank all the.
One last data point, Chair, that I would like to share before we transition. Please. Which is the data point that we collected in the survey. We conducted a survey just to assess where the community stood around mask choice, keeping masks, and no masks at all. And the data demonstrated that 42% of the population wanted mask choice, 42% wanted to keep masks, and 16% of the population wanted no mask. And this was based on 2,486 participants, and it was based on households. One of the things we made sure in collecting this data, that there were no repeat household data collected within these numbers. So these are single household data points that we collected to get a sense of where families were in terms of their thinking around mask choice or maintaining masks or thinking about no mask at all. And I thought it would be an important data point to share because it speaks to where the community at large is in this conversation.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. And I just want to say I also appreciate all the community members who participated in that survey and who have been very engaged in sharing their perspectives with us here on the board. I know that we have a lot of folks in attendance tonight. We weren't able to add public comment to tonight's agenda, but we have been very keenly following all the engagement and feedback that we've been getting. We appreciate it. Thank you. So in terms of where do we go from here? The $6 million question. So we do have a resolution that has been drafted by the board attorney, Tom Mooney, that responds to the action taken by the state legislature to end the statewide mask mandate on February 28th. I'm going to read that resolution, and then I'm going to open it up for the board members to discuss, perhaps amend, and then vote, keeping an eye on the clock. So this reads, the resolution regarding the end of the mask mandate and possible revision of the safety protocols related to COVID-19 if circumstances change. And it reads, whereas the Norwalk Board of Education anticipates that the Connecticut State Department of Education and the Connecticut Department of Public Health will terminate school mask mandates no sooner than February 28th, 2022, as authorized by Special Act 22-1, an act concerning the extension of certain executive orders and Department of Public Health authority. And whereas under current health and safety conditions, when the mask mandate is terminated, neither the Board of Education in Norwalk nor the superintendent will require the wearing of masks in Norwalk public schools, except as the CDC may continue to require masks on school buses, also recognizing that any individual may choose to wear a mask. And whereas the board and superintendent recognize the need to maintain health and safety protocols to protect the health and safety of students, staff, and the community related to COVID-19, including the possibility of reinstating a mask mandate if changed conditions so warrant. Now, therefore, it's hereby resolved that the board and the superintendent shall continue to consult on health and safety protocols to protect the health and safety of students, staff, and the community related to COVID-19, consistent with applicable laws, rules, regulations, and requirements and recommendations of local, state, and national public health authorities. Should conditions change, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the board may vote to revise the safety protocols to address without limitation circumstances in which all individuals entering a school building, a board facility, and or a board transportation vehicle may be required to wear an appropriate face covering. It's a lot of legalese that, to say in summary, what this particular resolution says is that if and when the statewide mask mandate ends on February 28th, this board and superintendent are not currently intending to enact one locally, but reserving the right to reinstate one should conditions change in a way that warrants that. So I'm going to put that out to the board, starting with Erica.
So I am going to vote in favor of lifting the mask mandate effective on February 28th. I believe very strongly that the risks in development and socialization and access to a child's education now outweighs the benefits in masking. We've heard a lot tonight about sensory issues in children chewing through masks. We've also heard from parents and educators that children who need to be taught social cues are missing the ability to see facial expressions. We've heard from children who receive speech services that their access to their education as it relates to speech therapy has been limited, and that they can't always see the position of the tongue, the shape of the mouth. Children with hearing loss are not able to read lips. They're also receiving sound in a muffled way, as is the case for children who are acquiring language as multi-language learners. So I feel very strongly, based on what we've heard tonight, that we should proceed with lifting the mask mandate.
Thank you, Erica. And just to clarify, the resolution reads that, of course, individuals may choose to wear a mask if they decide to. Diana?
I definitely agree with Erica. I am going to vote to lift the mask mandate for Monday the 28th for the exact same reasons that she has discussed here, and for all the information that we received tonight, all the questions that were being asked, especially, I think it was Deanna said, this is not short-term, this is a long-term situation. We cannot fail our children in education. You know, I come from a household where I have a brother that is blind. I myself had taken many years of speech therapy, and I know how difficult it is to even learn to speak without being able to see your teacher or the physician or anyone that's with you at that moment. And for that reason, I'm going to vote to lift on Monday.
Thank you, Diana. Mary Ellen?
I find this a torturous vote. There are very strong data points I see on both sides of this issue, but my feeling is that it is time to lift the mask mandate. I will vote in favor of that, but I feel it's begins a time of action, because the mitigations we have need to be strengthened and need our attention. To that end, I will vote in favor of what you've recommended, but I would like to add an addendum, I think is the term you use, Colin, to it.
Yes, if you would like to read that now, that'd be great.
Okay, so this addendum would explain a little bit more of our reasoning. We, the Norwalk Board of Education, support the mask optional, effective February 28th, 2022. If the pandemic conditions change, the superintendent and the BOE include the possibility of reinstating the mask mandate. After intensive review of local and state COVID metrics, collaborating with the health department, and a review of the Norwalk Public School COVID survey, which we just saw results, plus the emails and the Norwalk citizen voices heard in public hearings, we agreed to support mask optional. We view mask optional not as a victory for one side of the debate, but rather a step forward together, dealing with the impact of an active COVID-19 pandemic. While putting on a mask or removing one is a physical action, there's an emotional component needed to be addressed. We understand there might be a range of responses to this change. For some, it might be welcome. For some, it might increase levels of uncertainty. We encourage supportive discussions within families and within schools as the transition to mask optional occurs. Finally, we'd like to reach out to parents, teachers, and organizations of PTOs and SGCs to put their energy, along with the health department, into supporting two major things we need to work on. And one is vaccinations of that lower age group, 5 to 11, which now has only 34% vaccinated, fully vaccinated. And two, more knowledge and more availability of high quality masks. Thank you.
Mary Ellen, I certainly don't disagree with anything you just read, so I would be in favor of that addendum. But first, I want to just go through the initial resolution, because I don't know if that's the resolution we're going forward with at all. And so we'll go through on the initial resolution and see if, and then if that's the way we proceed, we'll address the addendum.
Not to interrupt you, sorry, Colin, but with snow tomorrow and the possible closure of school, depending on what we get, I'm going to assume we're going to move it to March 1st for Tuesday, so that the school NPS has time to plan and make any arrangements that they have to do.
Okay, I don't want to make that assumption, but it's certainly a possibility. Yeah.
You know, as it pertains to resolution, I'm not sure how relevant it is for us to be able to make recommendations without having a process to monetize what it looks like, the impact of the spread when we're currently not tracking that. You know, and I think the process for how we're going to base recommendations and what we're going to collect, just to be clear in determining that it's due to masks or not, I think is a very important piece in being able to really have that resolution be something that is clear and concise. Because just being mindful of the where youth are contracting it, not being able to speak to one location versus another, the impact of being in a place that doesn't have mask requirements and mandates. I think it's important to have a process in place for how we monetize that we can speak to. The cases went up, we know it's due to kids not wearing masks or not. Just to be clear in terms of how we're looking at the data and that the recommendation for anything to change would be something that is easily seen and accessed by board members and the superintendent.
Thanks, Godfrey. Yep, I think the current resolution just says, in response to public health recommendations. My personal feeling is that the sands is shifting too much to try to get more specific than that, but I appreciate that. I'm going to go to Kara.
Specific in terms of the data we're monitoring, to be able to have a discussion if we have to come back to this is what I'm speaking to. Being mindful that this is about mask mandates. There's a compound effect of multiple mitigation strategies is what we've been exercising. There's nothing in place right now that speaks to the impact of masks or no mask, especially as we're going forward and being in a city that doesn't have the mask mandate. I think it's an important piece to make sure that we are concise in what we're referencing and making any decision that will change after our vote.
Yeah, I agree with you, Godfrey. There actually may be data points that may exist that we don't even know of today. So that's why I'm hesitant to try to be too specific. But I wanted to go to Kara and then Janine.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, Mary Ellen, thank you for your revisions to the resolution as it was written by our attorney. I think that it showed compassion for both sides of the argument here. And I think we all recognize this is incredibly complicated. And I am all for mask choice. That said, I do not believe that our vaccination rates right now for our 5 to 11 age group are high enough. I do agree with Dr. Weinberger that age group should be at a higher vaccination rate here in Norwalk, and that should be closer to herd immunity and at the levels that we're seeing with the 12 to 17 age group. I am concerned about this new variant BA2. I think we don't know yet what the ramifications of it are. We just had a school break here. There were a lot of people traveling. And now coming back into our schools. So I am worried about a surge there. I do recognize that our surrounding communities such as Darien, Wilton, and Westport have all made decisions on how they will move forward, and they have decided to lift their mask mandates. But I would like to point out that we really, don't have much in common with our neighboring towns other than a border. We are a city, we are a large city, and I looked at what some of our other cities here in the state have done so far. And in Stamford, they have voted to extend their mask mandate to March 15th, in Bridgeport to March 31st. And in Danbury, they have not yet voted on this. So my feeling is that, yes, we have been in a pandemic for 2 years, and it's been a very long, difficult 2 years for so many. But I feel that we are rushing this. I think it is premature to lift our mask mandate here in our city. And I would vote to amend our resolution to include an extension out until March 15th, pending where our rates are at that time.
Thank you, Kara. Janine?
I would also like to thank Mary Ellen for that, for taking the time to draft that. It really did speak to, I think, our community and how we are coming to decisions. I also agree with Mary Ellen that this is a very torturous decision. I have been very torn listening to both sides. I have an advocate for masks in my own house of my 12-year-old, which has made it a very difficult decision for me. I'm listening and feel that we need an advocate for the people that are in multi-generational households that may have come to risk. I know that we're not seeing particularly the problems with our 5 to 11-year-olds as far as hospitalizations and, overcome with illness. I do feel that we still need to worry about the spread of COVID, as far as that they can spread it as well. I do also believe that we are just coming off this break. I would like, as we've seen in the past, some spikes go up after we break, and a lot of people have traveled, to also look at it as a March 15th start date.
I don't see any other hands. One thing I want to share, and invite my colleagues to consider is, when I think about how I would vote on this, I fully agree. I mean, 1,000% agree that there's too much in the air right now to relax. COVID's not over. We want it to be over. We do, but it's not. That said, as I asked Dr. Weinberger earlier, and I think he kind of saw where I was going with it. We're talking about an environment where mask mandates are dropping everywhere. And if I thought keeping a mask mandate in Norwalk public schools would move the needle on COVID throughout the city and the state and the country, I would keep the mask mandate. I happen to think that we're trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon by asking our kids to wear a mask when nobody else is. If I could institute a statewide or countrywide mandate, I would, but I can't. And all I have is what here in Norwalk and the Board of Education. I think it's a little, and this is just me personally, I think it's a little unfair for us to ask our kids to solve COVID when nobody else is really even trying. So, I hear you all, but I don't think extending the mask mandate to March 15th will actually serve the purposes that we would love it to serve. I don't know who hasn't had a chance to opine on the resolution.
So to be clear, I'm in favor of mask option, and I think in having the option, it should be clear what parents can do for those who want to exercise the option of keeping the mask on their kids, what alternatives, or to Diana's point earlier, just being clear around what that looks like for exercising the option, for how you want to go about keeping the child safe. And I think voting on it March 5th, having it go in place March 15th, is something that provides time to kind of flesh out, present that information. But I'm in favor of mask option.
Thank you, Godfrey. So I don't want to cut our discussion short, but I don't see any other hands up, and we have had some people indicate vote preference. Oh, there you go, Sherry.
What I'm going to say is that whatever we decide to do, we've got to be cautious and make sure that we continue to hold the hands of all of our health officials. COVID is not over with us. I think that the city and the district have done a good job at mitigating COVID so that people feel a sense of relief as if it's over and they feel good. And so they think that it's okay maybe to drop masks. However, I do understand that folks are tired of wearing masks. At the same time, our country has lost almost 1 million people, and there's still 2,000 people dying every day in our country from COVID, which is about equal to like 9/11 a day. So we're still in a really critical area. On the one hand, I feel like it makes sense to push it to the 15th to give things a chance to kind of blow out because we're coming back from a break. I do see your point, Colin, about trying to deal with this disease on the backs of our kids. I totally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and Sherry, I think you raised a great point. I mean, a lot of folks are still dying from this, and I would like, in response to that, President Biden or our Congress to do something. But, I don't know that extending our mandate to March 15th is doing anything to save any of those 2,000 people. So, that's where I'm coming from. So clearly, my vote would be in favor of tonight's resolution. And I would also vote to add Mary Ellen's very well worded addendum to it.
And can I just, one more thing, I just want to interrupt to say, I think we've seen, although there was a break, if I heard you, Sandra, correctly, we have not seen any positive tests coming out of yesterday's round of testing.
Sandra had to step out because remember we have the 6 o'clock meeting. We're having an issue because we can't log into the other meeting because we're in this meeting right now. So we have to
That's why I'm moving us along. But one thing that Sandra did mention earlier, and
that is correct.
That's correct. There has not been any positive. Yes, there's been no positive tests. Okay.
She also mentioned, I think it's important, that the actual monitoring of the spread shows that most of the infections are coming from home, not school. So I think we should make a mask mandate at home if that's the case. But anyway, so yes, we have a 6 o'clock feedback session for Norwalk High School. I hope all of tonight's 100 attendees will sign on to that, as well as there's so many important things going on. I do think if there's no other commentary, I would like to call for a vote on tonight's resolution. Either
for clarity, can I ask a question, Chair?
Of course.
So are we saying that we're looking at March 15 to go to mask optional?
That has been suggested by at least 2 board members. I'm going to call for a vote on the resolution as worded, which calls for mask optional to start on February 28th.
February 28th.
All in favor of tonight's resolution as it exists or as amended with Mary Ellen's addendum, please raise your hand. Raise your digital hand. It'll be easier to count. I'm going to raise mine too. Okay. Sorry.
Colin, I don't think you caught that. It took me a while to get to it.
Yeah, I'm counting now. I'm just going down the screen. So I see in favor is Colin Hostin, Erica De Palma, Mary Ellen. Yours keeps going up and down.
Yeah, sorry. Up.
Okay. Colin Hostin, Erica De Palma, Diana Carpio, Sherry Brown, and Mary Ellen Flaherty. That's 5 members, which is enough to pass. And so that was for the amendment. That's for the resolution ending the mask mandate unless people choose to wear a mask in Norwalk Public Schools on February 28th, with a narrative addendum by Mary Ellen Flaherty that will be added to the resolution. I'm going to call for, just so that we can record it, any abstentions? And any opposed? I didn't see any abstentions, and I know that, yeah. Thank you. Kara, Janine, opposed. Okay, well,
Godfrey too.
And Godfrey, I'm sorry, Godfrey. Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to keep up with everybody on screen. Okay, so that's 5 in favor, 3 opposed. I just want to reiterate, we're going to go to this other meeting now, but nothing about this decision is easy for any of us. I want to reiterate our real engagement and gratitude for everyone in the community. We will navigate this, as Dr. Estrella, as Sandra, as Mr. Pennington, everybody has said. We have tools that we will use to continue to do what we are here to do, which is to keep our students and staff safe. Nothing of that will change. And so, on whatever.
Colin, again, can we just confirm with Dr. Stree and her team about tomorrow? Will it be Tuesday?
We won't be able to make a call until the morning. We just, I was going, as we were having the meeting, also talking to the meteorologist, and it looks like we're gonna have to wait till the morning to make a decision because it's too
Right,
long.
but if you decide to close, then that means max optional should be Tuesday to give you time to prep.
It would be helpful to have a day to prep the staff and the team for the transition. I think that would be helpful. And also just to give principals time to establish protocols to ensure that when students come in, conversations can happen around being respectful to one another, regardless of what choices individuals in the building are making, and making sure that we have a climate of kindness around the transition, regardless of what people's preferences are. I think it's really important. So if we have a snow day tomorrow, it's going to be difficult to engage in those conversations because Monday is, we're going to move right into it. Also, I think I need to remind that although we're moving into mask optional, there's still by federal mandate masks in buses until March 18th.
Thank you.
So
I'd like to, I'll introduce a new motion then, that on top of the resolution that was just approved by the board, that I'd like to make a motion that if there is a snow day on February 25th, that the mask optional resolution that we just voted on will take effect on March 1st. Is there a second? Okay, I see Diana seconded. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. I only counted 4, so maybe it doesn't pass. Sorry, I'm just going to call for a vote again. If the motion which is on the floor and has been seconded is that if there's a snow day on February 25th, our resolution approved tonight takes effect on March 1st. If you are in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Any opposed?
I'm opposed. I think that's a communication we could probably email out to parents, and consistent with what I've seen with other districts do.
Erica, and that's 7 total. So there's 1 abstention, or did I just miscount? Okay, I think that's 7 in favor, 1 opposed. So yes, so we'll see what the weather looks like in the morning. Fingers crossed. I hope everybody stays safe. I want to thank every single person who has been involved in this discussion. It has not been easy by any means. I think it's not over by any means. Tonight's resolution does say that the board and the superintendent reserve the right to reinstate a mask mandate if conditions change in a way that so warrants. I hope it does not, but I just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone. Okay, on to meeting number 2. If there's no other discussion, I will adjourn tonight's meeting at 6:15. And again, thank you all, especially our